Thank you, everyone. Normally at these events, we tell people when there are questions at the end, make sure they have a question mark at the end, not a statement. But I actually think given the topic being the uplift, I would be curious after we chat here about things that you all find happy making in a difficult world. So we would accept statements as well. Would you agree, Todd?
Yeah, 100%.
All right, very good. So a little bit of background. So I work for CBS Mornings. I'm the one who sits on Gayle King's right, left if you're watching at home. But I'm here because I also have a digital show called The Uplift where we kind of gather news that is happy-making, or should be anyway. But prior to that, and this is the other reason, I met Todd 10 years ago when I wrote a very not uplifting memoir about my not uplifting family life. Todd is a senior vice president of publicity at Random House. Mm-hmm. And
yep.
that Doubleday was the publisher.
Doubleday was the publisher.
You were way above my level when this book came out. So you were like in the vicinity of the book, but you were not. This is a guy who's hanging out with like John Grisham on a regular basis. So he wasn't hanging out with me.
My work wife, Allison Rich, was your publicist.
Yes.
So you were in the best of hands.
But what I remember is the book got scheduled on Sunday morning and Fresh Air, which is like a huge deal. And so there was a lot of excited email traffic with Todd on it, and they printed more books. And then the book came out into the world, and the little book did not soar. It sank. At which point I could have really used your book. Little Pieces of Hope, happy making things in a difficult world.
Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you all for being here. I'm happy to be back in New Orleans. I was here 10 years ago on tour with Chuck Palahniuk for his short story collection, Make Something Up, where we had an event at Tippy Tina's, which, if I remember correctly, had 800 people there. And the last time I was in New Orleans before that was when I was a college senior, and we drove down from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and came to New Orleans on St. Patrick's Day. So happy to be back. Yeah.
So the story of Todd's book is an interesting one, and I'll let you pick it up. But as a matter of setting it up, the coronavirus has descended on America. New York City is on the brink of shutdown, or maybe has already gone into a shutdown. And you're on the train home to Westchester,
yep.
And you just open up your phone and start typing a list of things that what?
A list of things that made me happy. It was actually, I looked at the calendar today on my phone, popped up this morning, of course, and it was literally 3 years ago to the day today that I was on the train home, and everything was weird, and like the NBA had canceled the season the day before, and when you stop a billion-dollar business from happening, you know something is serious, and we were headed into 2 days later, the shutdown at work. So anyway, I was on the train home. I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know where this came from, but I thought I'm gonna make a list of happy-making things. And so I posted it. That first list has everything from long walks to a really good burger to Eudora Welty's One Writer's Beginnings to college basketball. And it was this sort of just scattershot zigzag list of everything that makes me happy. So I posted it, and I noticed that a lot of friends and family responded. The comments were very, very positive, and a couple of strangers had commented on it as well. So I thought, like, what the heck, I'll keep going. So the next night I did it, and then I just kept going and going and going and going. So what would happen is by March 13th, we were at home, working from home. So the routine became work, make a gin and tonic, have dinner, and then watch Jeopardy, and then I would go down this rabbit hole of making the list every night on my phone. I did everything on my iPhone.
And did it make you happy making the list?
Yeah, actually, it was really weird because at that time, like, the world shrank, of course, but our particular world did as well because Randy, my husband, we were shopping every week for his mom, who was in her late 80s at that time and terrified of getting her sick. And so we really, really isolated. And to have 2 unbridled hours, which is what basically each of these lists took to make, every day of thinking about things that I loved and putting them into the list, or even finding new things, was sort of the equivalent of, if anyone here watches Bravo's Below Deck, you will understand that that is 45 minutes that your brain is free of anything, and you just focus on that really stupid but wonderful show. That was sort of like my brain entered this other realm where the world was not infiltrating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, scientifically speaking, I suppose we'd have to try to tease apart the causal connections between the gin and tonic, the Jeopardy watching, and
just
the
one.
list. Correlation, maybe not causation.
There you go.
But so 2 hours per list is quite a long time, because these are short.
They're very short.
Maybe 50 items tops?
50 items tops or so. I didn't really keep a count. I kind of just looked at the length on Instagram. And what I would do is I would take one of the photos, one of my own photos, and post it, and the list would go under it. So that took, about 2 hours every day. And then as I went on, I started switching things up. I did, I think the first one was on a Sunday. I did a list called Things You Might Consider Doing Today, in which I list all of these things that you might want to do. And a friend of mine commented on them, there's no way one person can do this in a day. Maybe it should have been this week or something like that. There are also theme lists in there. There's I Love Halloween, that was in there. There's a themed list about graduation. There was one that I did cut from the book, happy making things in a difficult world, things they don't tell you before you get married. And my editor was kind of like, that one doesn't really fit. But yeah, it was a great exercise at a weird time. But I don't think you need to be going through an unprecedented global pandemic to pick this up. I called it a daily devotional of delight. I think my mother is the only person who has read it cover to cover straight through. I think you can dip in and out. My best friend from college told me it was a good bathroom book.
I would agree.
There you go. I was at the Savannah Book Festival last month, and part of their program is to go into SSU and meet with students. And I went in the first time that I've gotten up for an 8 a.m. class in about 35 years. Went in and met with a group of students before, and this young woman came up after, she asked a question, and she said, "Why did you include this piece about the beauty of moths?" That I found in the New York Times, and I read it, and we were talking about it, and I said, well, it was just an object that you see every day or sometimes in your life, like it's just a moth, but this writer elevated it to this thing of beauty that exists in the world, and I said I'd never thought about something as simple as a moth in that way, this complex, beautiful creature, and she said, well, I read it and I felt the same thing. And what I realized in that moment was, art exists beyond you, the creator. Your book exists beyond you, my book exists beyond me, but the reader and the author have this connection, and it was really amazing to be in her presence and see something that I'd put in the list, she went and found, and it made her happy.
Yeah. It's really, if you have not picked up the book, I recommend you do, because you can dip in at any point.
Yeah.
And each list will have multiple entries. If you're lucky, 10 will really speak to you, 5 maybe a little bit. A lot of them you'll just pass over. But what's amazing, it's almost like the effect textually of kind of scrolling through a social media feed where it's like, not for me, not for me, not for me, and then suddenly the magic happens and it's for you.
Yeah.
And there's a very literary effect here. It's almost like the shortest of short stories, because you've taken a detail out of what could have been an entire novel, and it's like a single sunflower on a windowsill, and you just get to ponder it, right? So one of them on the very first list was fat goldfish.
Specific. The specificity is
you can picture that,
important.
Right? And then you begin to put a scene around it in your own mind, and you've probably had a moment in your own life when you've thought, look at how fat that goldfish is.
Well, there's a Thanksgiving list, which is also another favorite holiday of mine, and my stepdad is one of 10. And I grew up in a really rural town in southern Illinois, about 6 hours south of Chicago, and Thanksgiving Day was a production because there were usually 65 to 80 people there at the house, and in one of the items on that list is the pile of coats on the bed. And that's something that I never forgot as a kid, and again, the specificity of all the lists is what's really important. There are some things that are connected. You will see going from one thing to the next. There are some that are not. The zigzag was really important. And the actual look of the book is due to my colleague Sabrina Bowers, who's the designer at Penguin. And when we were talking about it, I said to her, like, I just want different sizes of fonts and different kinds of fonts because the lists themselves move about, and I'd like visually for the reader to experience that. And the email back was just, okay, got it. And then she designed it, and that's what it's become.
It's beautiful. It really is. You can enter it at any point. Because you are so good at the detail, and the detail is what makes this work, and I know that there's a lot of reading in your own life that had to go into that. I would love to hear, and you were a bookseller before you had a fancy job in publishing. Could you talk a little bit about your life in books?
Sure. I grew up from a long line of voracious readers. My papa, my dad's dad, was a coal miner at the Freeman 4 mine in Southern Illinois, and I found out shortly before my grandmother passed, she told me a story that he hated going down in the elevator every day into the mine. He hated it. But his lunch break was a respite for him because he took a book every day. And he read everything from Shakespeare to Stephen King. And he would go off to a spot by himself and read. My mom is a voracious reader, always has been. My Uncle Dennis, once when I visited him in Texas, sent me home with a duffel bag that I had to check of books that he thought I should read. So it was there in my bloodstream. And long story short is, I graduated on a Friday. I had gone to New York on a church trip with my Methodist youth group when I was 16. And I came back and told my mom I was gonna move there. I graduated Friday, I packed up the U-Haul Monday. I was in New York on Tuesday, and I was a bookseller for a couple of years. And then—
Where were you a bookseller?
I was at the Walden Books on Wall Street, which is now long gone, RIP. And a friend at work's friend was the managing editor of Random House. And Jerry said to me, Amy says there's a job opening in the publicity department as an assistant. You can talk to a wall and you like to read. I think you should go for this. So I had no clue what publicity was. I didn't know publicists talk to producers at CBS Mornings to get people on the show, or NPR or anything, so I went in blind, but I loved to read. And somehow I tricked these people into hiring me, and 25 years later, I'm still there.
You're still
there. Yeah.
The book world requires all books to, for all their diversity and their variety, to end up being slugged for booksellers with a certain label on the back.
Yeah.
Fiction, memoir, history, and yours falls into the category of self-help / inspiration.
Yeah.
Which is a title that not everybody wears comfortably. Did you?
My husband may disagree with that
Okay.
as well, so just so you know. I didn't, each publisher decides the BISAC category where the book should go. I had a friend tell me recently there's a lot of memoir in this book as well, because in addition to the lists themselves, there are 16 different essays. By the time I had sold the book, I had around 50 of the Instagram lists done, and I thought, voila, that's it. And my editor, Meg, said to me, hold on a second, we need 50% new material. You're gonna have to do some more lists. And I think to give the reader a break, why don't you pick about a dozen or so topics that you individually love and expand on them. It'll give the reader a break both from the lists and visually, and you get to talk about one thing a little bit longer. So there's stuff in there about my love of road trips. There's an essay called Taking the Leap. There's an essay about, I'm sure everybody in this room has been affected by a teacher in one point of their life that changed their life completely. Mine is Pat Bullard. Mrs. Bullard and I are still very close. She was my 6th grade English teacher in Carterville, Illinois, and drove a blue Porsche. Super cool.
Is blue Porsche on the list anywhere? Because I think a blue Porsche is a happy-making
I think it is, if I remember. Actually, the weirdest part of all of this was that when the book went into copy edits, these two colleagues of mine who are in the copy editing department at Penguin had to compile a list of everything that's in the book. And by the time it was done, there are actually over 3,000 individual items.
Wow.
And then they broke them out by categories. So it's books, plays, recipes, paintings, songs, you name it, it's in there. Movies is another one, TV shows. And it was kind of amazing to see all of that, because when you're doing this piecemeal each day, you can't really see the bigger picture until it's done in front of you.
Has the job of putting together this book, which began not as a job, but
Yeah.
at some point it became, there's a contract,
contract.
involved, there's a deadline involved, there's other professionals involved. Did it alter the pattern of your own thought? So this habit of finding happy making things, or a list of things to do today, or isolating a song that is special to you, or a love of red velvet cake, which is another essay.
Yeah.
Has there been a lasting change in the pattern or habits of your mind?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
You still look and find, in a room like this is a happy-making thing, I would say, these beautiful designs and the lights.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what happened when everything shut down, people turned inward, right? And the one thing that I tried to make myself do, because, who knew what was going to happen? I was the idiot that told colleagues at work, we'll be back in 2 weeks, so take some pencils and some extra files if you need them. What I pushed myself to do was to notice the world around me. And that, coupled with the fact that I'm a bit of a pack rat at home, like we have a lot of books, I save articles, I save postcards of favorite paintings or photographs. So I was able to kind of be a magpie and draw from that. Or conversely, we'd be in our car and a great song would come on to the radio, and so I'd take a screenshot of it to save it for a future list. So there were times I think that I didn't do that before that I still do now 3 years later.
That's valuable.
Yeah.
What's the reaction been like and the interaction you've had with people who are responding to the list and then to the book?
It's been pretty great. I mean, to say that this has all come about and call it a miracle is an understatement. I am the caboose of the publishing train. In the
What do you mean by that?
The publicity department is sort of like the last thing that comes together for the publication of the book.
But you're actually you're the engine.
Well,
you're
I
the
don't
thing
know.
that pulls it out into public and gets it somewhere.
Well, we're the last folks, along with marketing, who get a hold of the book and then do what we do. And so for me to actually see a book be created in real time, and then all of the people that have to work on it together, our departments are disparate, but to experience it from submitting the manuscript to my editor, to having it go into copy edits, to have it being designed, to having Josie Portillo, who did all of the amazing art in the book, to work with her, and then the paper and the production of it, it's kind of amazing. And that was a new perspective that I'd never had before. To hear people say, well, I didn't like this, but I do like that, that's been a great thing. The student that I mentioned earlier, or folks who have I met someone the other day who a friend had given them the book, and she didn't realize it was me that I'd written it, and she sent me.
I didn't realize it was
Yeah.
you either. Honestly, he comes to my day job fairly regularly because he works with so many big authors, and we book them, like John Grisham.
Yeah.
And so we had a fairly regular amount of contact, but I did not know that this was you, honestly, until I was on the plane down here. And I was like, wait, is that Todd? Because it's just a drawing on the back.
Yeah, Josie did a little art drawing of me.
Yeah.
It's been truly surreal. So you've done this, you've written a book. So the writing of a book is really weird. And the only way that I can describe it, I don't know if you'll agree, is it's kind of like there's a toy in a box in your apartment or your house, and only you can play with the toy in the box. So every day after gin and tonic and Jeopardy, you go get the toy in the box, and you put it on a table, and you open the lid, and you take out the toy, and you play with the toy for a couple of hours. Nobody else is there with you, and then that time is up. You put the toy back in the box, you put the lid on, and you put it back in the corner, and it has no effect on the rest of your life whatsoever. And that was the only way that I could describe the writing process, because I'd never done anything like this before.
I think it's very idiosyncratic. I think everybody has a different writing experience and a different process. I found, and this is not a writing session, but you do need happy making things when you're trying to write.
Sure.
I needed time to kind of, it would take me an hour just to get back up to the spot where I had left off the day before, and in order to make a little bit of progress and then shut things down.
Right.
You seem like you must have been in a good groove, though, because the exercise is fairly similar each day. And I imagine throughout your day you'd be gathering material. So maybe kind of you're starting the car, but the car is already parked on an incline, so it's going to roll a little bit.
Yeah.
You're going to get a rolling start.
Yeah, that definitely did happen. And I think, there's nothing like a deadline and a contract to get you motivated. Once I knew it was due October 1st of 2020, I actually made a grid of how many lists and essays I needed to do, and next to each one of them, I put a tiny little box, and I would check it off of this sheet when I was done every day. And that kind of helped keep me going, but it was the act of it sort of engaging with all of these different things, and you'll see in the book there are sort of 30 bigger art pieces throughout. Those are some of my favorite things, like the Mutter Museum, if anyone has ever been to Philadelphia, this insane medical museum that's amazing. There's a drawing that Josie did of the dinosaur falling apart at the end of Bringing Up Baby, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. There's a drawing of Anne Rice's house, not to suck up to a New Orleans audience, but there's a drawing of Anne Rice's house in the Garden District. So it was just a joy to do every day. The essays were really tricky. I knew I wanted to do the 4 seasons because they mean a lot to me personally. I like that change throughout the year. But then, the Red Velvet Cake essay is actually a love letter to my grandmother. We were very, very close, and every time I came home, she would make a 7-layer red velvet cake. And I realized at work the other day, I have a photo of the two of us. I was much younger, thinner, and had brown hair, and behind us is one of the cakes. And I don't think I'd really ever noticed that before, which was great. And, there's an essay like A Love of Grouches. There's an essay about summer reading. So there's a lot to offer in there.
I love the love of grouches.
Thanks.
I am a grouch. That's why I was asking about your relationship to the category of self-help. Because it requires a leap to say, okay, I'm now a person who is going to buy and then read a self-help volume.
There you go.
There is a moment of change there. So, because and by the way, people, we're probably 5 minutes away from opening up the mics, and we want to hear happy making things from you and things that are tricks in your life that you find uplifting. We all need that, I think, right now.
Yep.
Because these items are so specific and they ring a little bell sometimes deep in the brain, I am curious about not just general interaction with readers, but was there anybody that reached out to you to say, hey, when you mentioned the cover of Dolly Parton's 1973 album, Shine, I think it was, or something like that, like, it made me pick it up, or reminded me of my mother, or made me call this friend I hadn't, because I imagine, whether you heard it from people or not, inevitably, with a book like this, you are, in tiny ways, but important ways, changing the trajectory of people's lives.
Well, that's very kind of you. I think one of the ways that I look at the book is that it's a book of action. It's a book of action, and it's a book of reflection. A friend of mine that I write at the beginning says, there's a very fine line between discovery and memory, I believe is how she put it. And I think that's really true, because there are some things, as you mentioned in the book, that trigger, like, oh, I love that song, I love that show, I love that movie, I remember that feeling. Or conversely, there are things where it's like, ish, he put that in there. I do get responses from people saying things like that, and it's been really, really gratifying, because you want that connection. I think we live in a world that desires connection between people at a polarized time. Or conversely, I think that we all have those moments in our life where it's just been really, really tough. Like, you have the song that got you through the breakup, the movie that you watch when you're sad, the book that you love to go back to over and over again. And those touchstones in your life are kind of what keep you going, or keep you afloat even.
Well, then, on the subject of commonality and things that are unifying, because you probably have a lot of data on social media where many of these lists first appeared, could you do like a Family Feud style, show me 5 things that people are made happy by? Like, what are the top happy-making things in this world?
I don't know that I could be that specific. I do think there are.
There's got to be a couple that are just like almost universally popular.
Okay, the one thing that I will recommend is, and every time that I've told somebody to go listen to this, they agree. If you have never heard Ella Fitzgerald's version of Irving Berlin's Blue Skies, you need to go listen to it today, because in the middle she does this riff that is absolutely wild, and what you realize is she's taking songs that exist and putting it into just her going, freestyle. And at one point she does a part of Rhapsody in Blue, and every time I hear that, like, it's just the absolute best. That's one of them. I think that what a lot of friends have told me that they like in the book are the feelings that are evoked, or the weird stuff like mowing your lawn on a diagonal because the stripes will look cooler. So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
All right, all right. I think we can open the mics up and hear from the crowd here. Anyone brave enough to step forward? Nobody? Everybody?
If not,
no one has anything?
I can
If you don't mind, would you use the microphone so we can record?
Sure.
Great.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Julia. Todd and I were just on a panel before this. We have the same job. I'm just at Simon & Schuster. And I'm so curious about how writing a book, we work with writers all the time.
Yeah.
Did this make you appreciate what they do more, or were you like, ugh, that author who missed their deadline 2 years ago should totally get on my program?
Well, actually, we should clarify. Did you, in fact, make your deadline, or did you, as is standard in the world of publishing, extend it multiple times?
Not only did I make my deadline, I turned it in a day early, which I was determined to do.
This
Like
is
a
a
good
total freak
publisher.
show. This is a total freak show. This does not happen.
Yeah, it made me have a real appreciation for what writers do. I'd never done anything like this. I can't imagine how you wrote your memoir. Like, you're not only mining your past, but you're recreating everything. And I just had never thought about doing this. And so the most important thing that I took away from it was the discipline that a writer has to have. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I think there's no one way of writing. Everybody, as you mentioned, like, everybody has a different process. Some people use outlines, others just wing it. I work with Bonnie Garmus, who wrote Lessons in Chemistry, and she said that she got the inspiration from the book after a bad day at work. She wrote the first chapter and the last 3 sentences that actual day. So she had the dartboard of where she was going to, but others just kind of go and go and go. So it actually did make me appreciate how all of this crazy stuff works. Thank you for asking.
And my friend Anne is now at a microphone.
Hi.
Hello. The freedom of being able to make a statement instead of asking a question, I can't resist it. Thank you for
Exactly.
that. That's magic at a book event. So my statement is one of those things that is the joy and the happiness, and I think Tony will understand as well because he has small children. There is a moment when you go in to look at a sleeping child. And that moment when your child is asleep and they don't need anything from you and you can just appreciate them and love them, but you don't have to feed them or pick them up or do
It is a
anything.
gorgeous moment.
It is it's just like, that is the joy of all joys. And
It is.
Can I steal that for a list?
That's
You can
really good
take
for a
it-
list.
take it, Tom.
And on the subject of the joy of reading, I once read a novel where having small children sleeping in the house was described as like having a warm fire going. And it's a comforting kind of part of the furniture in a way.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Are you going to write a sequel, by the way? Sad making things in a...
Somebody said I should write a sequel called Little Pieces of Nope. Penguin has not asked yet, but I will say I already have more than, material ready to roll should they ever be interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And we have another...
Sure.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi. I haven't read your book, but
okay.
listening to the list, it reminds me a lot of mindfulness and, gratitude lists. And I just wondered, was that one of the? It seems like that might have been the inspiration to start writing the book. And has that been something that actually has made you more grateful or happier?
That is a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've kept going, and I think that when times get tough or the world is nuts, which is every day right now, I think having that moment that is quiet, that is something that brings you joy, that, there's someone I read somewhere that it may have, I don't know if it was Oprah or not, but it was like, write down 5 things that you're grateful for at the end of the day. But it goes back to that notion of noticing the world around you. Like, I'm no expert. I don't write self-help books in general. I don't have a PhD. Like, I just kind of, at a scary moment where the world turned, that brought me comfort, and I just kept going in order to have that in my life. And I think a lot of people do that. I think, whether you're facing divorce or illness or troubles in life that happen, you have to have that thing that just keeps you going.
I think you brought up actually another interesting
Yeah.
and related point here, which is you wrote the first list on your phone
Yeah.
on a train. Did you write the subsequent list in physical form in a notebook, or did you stay digital? And the reason I ask that, because I find whether it's getting a worry out of your head or it's trying to hold on to something that makes you happy, I find making it, writing it, printing it with pen and paper makes it physical and external in a way that's really important.
I kept going on the phone.
On the phone?
They're all right there.
Wow.
And then when I was doing the new ones, I called them not posted number 25, not posted number
But honestly,
26.
taking, I mean, this is so, like, I work with pencil. Even at the office, I work with pencil. And, like, the joy of taking a pencil and scratching a piece of paper is one of those things that makes me happy in a difficult world.
Well, what was weird was when I printed it all out, and it was in manuscript form, and then I was able to do that. And then I would switch things around if the rhythm wasn't working right. But I did stick to digital throughout.
Wow.
But to each his own. There's no one right way.
To each his own.
Hi.
Hi.
I was also reminded of gratitude lists, and my friends, the people I want to be with, they all, the people I don't avoid,
Yeah.
all do gratitude lists.
Sure.
But as you describe it, your technique is very helpful for me because my gratitude list is very pedestrian, It's like coffee. Coffee always makes a list. And you just expanded it for me. I never thought of like works of art that I love or movies so that was extremely helpful.
Oh, that's great to hear.
And I have a niece, she doesn't do a gratitude list, but she does every night what surprised me today, what brought me joy, and what am I grateful for.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the pedestrian moments are what make up your life, right? I mean, that happens to every one of us every day. And I think that came into full relief in the past 3 years. The last essay in the book is called The Things That Last. And when you notice the dedication of the book, it's to my mom and her parents and my great-grandmother. My mother's parents and her grandmother were killed on the same day. My mother's parents died in a car wreck, and when they told my great-grandmother that her daughter had passed, she had a heart attack on the spot. So it was a triple funeral. And it's very sad, so stick with me here. But what I realized, I had to have something that brought the book together, and it wasn't quite working. And that essay sort of came out, and what I think of it as, all of these things still exist in the book: feelings, TV shows, movies, books, whatever, plays, articles, all of those things still exist. And I think that love lasts as well. My mother was 5 when this happened. Their love was imprinted on her and then imprinted on me. And in a weird way, I felt like that connected to all of the objects that are there in the book. I feel like I'm rambling, but I think I made sense. Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, like, when you were writing your self-help book, like, also like, taking in your personal experiences, like, did you read any other self-help books, like, for inspiration or motivation to keep finishing the book?
I didn't while I was reading, but there are 2 that I love, which are Anna Quinlan's A Short Guide to a Happy Life, which is great. And then there's H. Jackson Brown's Life's Little Instruction Book. It's this tiny little book that came out 100,000 years ago, and it was like $5.95, $6.95, and I love that one. The one thing that I did do is I went back and reread Charlotte's Web, because in the Grouch essay I talk about Templeton the rat, and then I went back and reread From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankweiler, which if you have never read or haven't read in a long time, holds up 100%.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Before we go to our next questioner, and no favoritism to my wife over here, I'm going to go, it is an either or, we have to alternate. I have a question I'd love people to think about here, and part of our remaining time,
Sure.
Since the back half of the book is the idea that this is a difficult world, and I'm in the news business, and even though it's a morning show, a good 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes more of the show is the sheer tonnage of heartache is sometimes difficult to handle. So I would be curious to hear how people relate to that difficult world, how much you want to hear about it, if you ignore it completely, if you engage at all, and if you have any thoughts on how we talk about it in the news business. I always like hearing how people are responding to what we're trying to do. So in the background, if it comes to you, that's what I'm curious about. Yes?
So I'm just kind of brainstorming here. It's kind of a comment and a question. So it reminded me, so I'll just say I'm a physician, work with very underserved populations, and it reminded me that like at various points I tried to make lists for my patients of things that they could do for free to make them happy, usually in the context of certain things going on or smoking cessation where they have to kind of think about or do something else. And it's really hard. You can come with a few pretty quickly, but then like for homeless patients, I'll say my other populations in prison. But like, I'm just curious if there's things you could pull from your list that you could even like collate them.
There definitely are. I mean,
Yeah.
this is you can access this for $0 right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I tried to do in the book is also evoke those memories and feelings. Of course, I'm completely blanking on something, but I will open the book and find one for you.
I mean, you have a copy here. Use mine.
Oh, thank you. The Thanksgiving example was a good one. I mean,
A moment of clarity, a moment of peace, a moment
Yeah.
a person believes in you.
snuggling on the couch, looking through the door's peephole, someone who tickles you to the point of silent laughter, someone who tucks you into bed at night. I tried to keep sort of things that everyone could experience. Again, you may hate something that I've put in here, but I think you kind of can't argue with someone who tucks you into bed at night. Not that I need that as a 50-year-old man, but still.
Yeah, it's definitely
Thank you.
accessible. Yes, Katie.
I think you do a great job with the news every day, I have to say.
Thanks.
So thank you for delivering it with care and compassion. My job is stressful, as you know. I talk about politics a lot, which can be maddening. Also a lot of tragedy. And as you know, I get very worked up about it. And one of the things that helps me, and this is going to be cheesy, but thinking of all the decisions that I've made in my life, some of them very bad, and appreciating even the terrible ones because they all led me up to a makeup room at MSNBC in 2015 when I met my husband. And going back and appreciating all of those moments put together enables me to think about how the world can't be such a terrible place all the
Right.
time because the world brought us here.
Yeah.
And it brings me happiness and peace.
I love that because that moment there got you to here.
Exactly. And now
you,
I'm
sweetie.
in New Orleans with the love of my life.
Well, I love you very much. She tucks me in every night because
I do.
I get up way earlier than her.
Works, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it works really well, and it's happy making. But actually, she brings up a very important point, which is there are lots of things in our life that you wouldn't put on one of these lists because they feel like a terrible thing that happened, and they might actually be on that day a terrible thing. But if you take a deeper perspective, there's kind of maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's going to put you on a path to something that you actually want, and you don't know how to get there, and this is the journey.
I agree with that, and I think we're almost out of time, so I think what I could do is leave everybody with a list.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Although, do we want to take?
Oh,
I think we have time for one more question.
ahead.
Yeah.
Hi. So I was thinking about what you just posed about how do you deal with the bad news and what like that. And so I'm often called by my friends the silver lining, the really annoying silver lining, because I've been through some stuff in my life where I have to find the silver lining in my life. And so when I hear something that's terrible or upsetting or whatever, I can't help but find the silver lining in my life. And so I'm really happy, and I already booked it in my library. So I'm
Very good.
Great. Thank
That's
you.
great.
So thanks, y'all.
Thank you. All right, I can do.
Do you have a particular one that you go to?
Nah.
To find one at random?
Just do a random. Okay,
right.
here we go.
All right, here we go.
Happy making things in a difficult world. A long hike that you've done countless times before. That Maine quote, life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death, end quote. That amazing story that Matthew Rosenberg posted on Twitter after Carl Reiner passed away. Dipping your fingers in water to shape the final touch on the sandcastle. That 1947 Jacob Lawrence painting, The Builders, Caramel Apples, Candy Corn, Charlie Brown's Shirt, Cyndi Lauper's recording of You Don't Know, Jack and Rebecca and Kevin and Kate and Toby and Randall and Beth and William and Miguel. A Good Prognosis, the fact that the 1831 London Bridge now stands in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. That July 16, 2019 Paris Review essay, The Crane Wife by C.J. Hauser. Marlee Matlin, National Treasure. Margaret McNamara, National Treasure. August Wilson, National Treasure. Shirley Horn's recording of I Thought About You. Wallace and Gromit, Kermit and Fozzie, Ashburn and Mullins. That 1986 Lorna Simpson photo, Water Bearer. Your high school freshman year photo, mine is terrible. Sleeping in Study Hall. Jacqueline Mitchard's 1996 novel, The Deep End of the Ocean. The entire score of Jurassic Park, the original cast of A Chorus Line, and the symmetry of scaffolding. There you go. All right.
Todd Doughty, thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this,
It's a
Tony.
beautiful book.
Appreciate it.
You've brought a lot of happiness in the world, one item at a time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming.
Appreciate it.